"You never prioritize me," she said, after I sacrificed my family, friends, and health to keep her happy. That night, she blocked me. Again. 2 weeks later, she started begging, "Please, let me back in." But by then, I had already started living. She never saw that coming. I stare at my phone, the notification light blinking relentlessly. 17 missed calls. 23 text messages. 4 new friend requests on platforms I haven't opened in days. My stomach knots itself into something so tight it feels like it might never unravel. It's been exactly 11 hours since she blocked me. Again. And 3 hours since the barrage of attempts to reconnect began. 5 years of my life is contained in the digital ghosts haunting my phone. 5 years of learning to walk on eggshells, of apologizing for things I never did wrong, of gradually disconnecting from everyone who once mattered to me. 5 years of hearing that I'm not enough, that I'm too much, that I'm saying things wrong, that I'm not saying enough. The phone vibrates again. My hands shake. I remember the promise I made last time this happened. If you block me again, I won't come back. I said it with conviction 3 months ago, after spending 2 days in a spiral of anxiety, wondering what I'd done wrong, crafting the perfect apology for an offense I couldn't identify. When she finally unblocked me then, I crawled back with relief, grateful for the chance to begin the exhausting dance again. My academic advisor noticed the dark circles under my eyes during our last meeting. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she said, concern evident in her voice. I mumbled something about finals, but the truth was, I'd been up until 4 a.m. for a week straight, trying to fix something I'd apparently broken in my relationship. I still don't know what it was. I should be studying for my economics final right now. Instead, I'm frozen, caught between the screaming instinct to preserve myself and the habitual pull to return to what's familiar, even if what's familiar is slowly killing me. My phone lights up again. For a brief moment, I see her name, and my finger hovers over the screen, a reflex born from years of prioritizing her emotions over my own existence. Instead, I set the phone face down on my desk and close my eyes. I don't remember exactly when I started disappearing. Maybe it was during that first year when my best friend stopped inviting me out, because she always finds a reason for you to cancel anyway. Maybe it was when I missed my little sister's high school graduation because there had been a fight the night before, and I couldn't risk my phone ringing during the ceremony. Perhaps it was when I changed my coffee order from what I actually liked to what wouldn't trigger a comment about my childish taste. The changes were so gradual that I hardly noticed them happening. Like a statue being worn away by acid rain, I was eroding one microscopic layer at a time. I used to paint. The corner of my room still holds a stack of untouched canvases I bought 2 years ago, covered in a thin film of dust. The last time I tried to spend a Saturday afternoon with my acrylics, my phone chimed every 3 minutes with increasingly urgent messages about how I was ignoring her, how I clearly didn't care, how I was probably cheating or lying about what I was doing. I put the paintbrushes down that day and never picked them up again. My mother stopped asking me to come home for weekend dinners after I canceled at the last minute for the 5th time in a row. The look of resignation on her face during our last video call haunts me. "We miss you," she said simply, and I mumbled something about being busy with school. The truth was, spontaneous family visits had become impossible. Each one required careful negotiation. Each minute away was tracked. Each smile shared with someone else became suspicious. My roommate, who used to be one of my closest friends, now barely speaks to me. He tried, for a long time. He invited me to parties, to study groups, to simple movie nights. Eventually, he stopped trying. Now we exchange polite nods in the hallway between our rooms, like strangers sharing a temporary living space. I wonder sometimes when I became this hollow version of myself. This person who can't make a simple decision about where to eat dinner without considering whether it will start an argument. This person who has forgotten what it feels like to laugh without immediately checking to see if the laughter is acceptable. There's a photo on my desk from my freshman year of college. In it, I'm surrounded by friends, my smile wide and unguarded, my posture relaxed. I don't recognize that person anymore. I don't remember what it feels like to be them. "This isn't healthy," my sister said during one of our rare phone calls 6 months ago. I had just finished explaining why I couldn't talk long. My partner was waiting for me to call her back, and if I took too long, she'd assume the worst. I brushed off my sister's concern with practiced ease. "All relationships take work," I said, parroting words that had been used to justify endless nights of tears and circular arguments. The warnings came from everywhere, a chorus I deliberately tuned out. My academic advisor gently suggested campus counseling services after I missed 3 assignment deadlines in a row, all because I'd been up all night trying to solve relationship problems that seemed to have no solution. "You seem different," my father said during a brief visit home. I had flinched when my phone rang during dinner, knocking over a glass of water in my haste to answer it. "You never used to be this jumpy." A classmate I barely knew pulled me aside after a group project meeting. "I hope this isn't crossing a line," she said hesitantly, "but the way your partner spoke to you on the phone just now, that's not okay. No one should talk to you like that." I thanked her for her concern and assured her everything was fine. But her words stayed with me, a persistent echo I couldn't quite silence. Even strangers could see what I refused to acknowledge. The barista at my regular coffee shop asked if I was okay after witnessing a particularly intense phone conversation that left me shaking so badly I could barely hold my cup. My old high school teacher, who I ran into at a campus event, took one look at me and said, "What happened to that confident kid I used to know?" The most brutal warning came from my roommate during one of our last real conversations. "You're not living anymore," he said bluntly. "You're just existing around her schedule, her moods, her demands. This isn't a relationship. It's a hostage situation." I got angry with him for that. Defensive. I didn't speak to him for weeks. Deep down, I knew he was right, but acknowledging that truth would mean facing the reality of what my life had become. It would mean admitting that the person I loved was hurting me. It would mean recognizing that love shouldn't feel like constant anxiety and walking on eggshells. It would mean accepting that I needed to leave. So instead, I ignored the warnings. I retreated further into isolation. I convinced myself that no one else understood the complexity of our love, that the difficulty was proof of its significance. I told myself that relationships were supposed to be hard. I never stopped to ask myself, are they supposed to be this hard? Tonight was like any other night at first. A simple conversation that derailed without warning. I still don't fully understand what I said wrong. Something about my tone, maybe. Or perhaps I used the wrong word to describe how my day had gone. So many of our fights start this way, with some perceived slight that I didn't intend and can't identify. We were on a video call. I was telling her about a group project for my marketing class. She interrupted to ask why I sounded so excited about working with my group members. I explained that I was just relieved the project was going well. Somehow, within minutes, this evolved into accusations that I was hiding something, that I was acting differently, that I clearly preferred spending time with my classmates over talking to her. I tried the usual tactics, apologizing, explaining, reassuring. Nothing worked. The familiar pattern played out. Her anger escalated, my anxiety spiked, and I found myself desperately trying to fix a situation that was spiraling beyond my control. "You never prioritize me," she said. "You never have." 5 years of prioritizing her above everything else, my education, my family, my friends, my health. And yet, it was never enough. Would never be enough. The realization hit me like a physical blow. 2 hours into the argument, exhausted and emotionally drained, I finally said something I'd never dared to before. "This isn't fair. I don't deserve to be treated this way." The screen went black. Call ended. Within seconds, I discovered I was blocked on every platform. A familiar panic set in, the desperate need to fix things, to apologize for standing up for myself, to do whatever was necessary to end the punishment of silence. But this time, something was different. As I sat in my dimly lit room, the silence gradually transformed from terrifying to peaceful. For the first time in years, the constant buzz of anxiety began to quiet. My shoulders relaxed. I took a deep breath that didn't feel like it was catching on sharp edges in my chest. I picked up my phone to begin the familiar ritual of finding a way to apologize, to reach out through alternative channels, to fix what I had broken. But then I remembered my promise. If you block me again, I won't come back. I set the phone down. An hour later, the notifications started. She had unblocked me. The messages ranged from angry to pleading, from accusatory to apologetic. Cow. The missed calls accumulated. New friend requests appeared on accounts I rarely use. The old me would have responded immediately, grateful for the opportunity to repair what had been broken, relieved that the silence had ended. But something had shifted. For the first time, I could see the pattern with painful clarity. The cycle would continue: argument, blocking, silent treatment, reconciliation, temporary peace, then repeat, until one of us broke it. My body was screaming the truth my mind had been avoiding. I needed to be the one to break the cycle, and I needed to break it now. My phone keeps vibrating, but I've moved it to my desk drawer, muffling its desperate cries for attention. As the hours pass, a strange sense of calm begins to replace the familiar anxiety. It's like I've been underwater for years, and I'm finally coming up for air. In this unexpected quiet, I start to hear voices, not the ones in my head that constantly question and second-guess my every move, but the real voices that have been trying to reach me through the fog of this relationship. I remember my mother's words from months ago. We miss the real you, the one who used to laugh without checking to see if it was okay to laugh. I recall my roommate saying, "This isn't love, man. Love doesn't make you look like you haven't slept in weeks. Love doesn't make you afraid to check your phone." My sister's voice. You're allowed to prioritize your own happiness. That's not selfish, it's necessary. My academic advisor. Sometimes the most important lessons we learn in college have nothing to do with textbooks. Even the barista who barely knows me. Everyone deserves kindness, especially from the people who claim to love them. For years, I've been filtering these voices through the lens of my relationship, dismissing them as misunderstandings or exaggerations. Now, in the silence of my decision not to respond, I hear them clearly for the first time. They weren't attacking my relationship, they were trying to save me. I open my laptop and find myself typing a message to my sister. It's short, just a few sentences asking if she has time for a call tomorrow. Her response comes almost immediately. Anytime, day or night, I'm here. Such simple words, but they bring tears to my eyes. There is no manipulation there, no hidden agenda, no subtle punishment, just an offer of unconditional support. I send a similar message to my parents. Their response mirrors my sister's, immediate, warm, without question or judgment. These are the relationships that love should echo. These are the interactions that shouldn't leave me analyzing every word for hidden traps or potential explosions. My phone continues to vibrate in the drawer. Each buzz used to feel like an emergency, a crisis that required immediate resolution. Now, each unanswered notification feels like a step toward reclaiming something essential that I've lost. My autonomy, my peace, my sense of self. I open my window and take a deep breath of the cool night air. For the first time in years, I feel like I might be making a decision for myself, rather than to avoid conflict or earn temporary peace. The thought is terrifying. It's also exhilarating. 3 days have passed since I made the decision not to respond. 3 days of silencing notifications, of resisting the programmed urge to apologize for boundaries, of fighting against the current, pulling me back toward familiar pain. It feels like I'm underwater, but not like before. Before, I was drowning, desperate for air, for relief, for escape. Now, I'm suspended in something quieter, a stillness that's both uncomfortable and necessary. The attempts to reach me continue, changing tactics like weather patterns. Anger gave way to concern, concern to pleading, pleading to promises of change, promises to reminders of good times, reminders to accusations, and now, finally, to something that sounds almost like acceptance, punctuated by occasional bursts of renewed effort. I've moved my phone to silent mode, checking it only twice daily, bracing myself each time for the emotional impact of seeing her words. Each message is designed to hit a particular target. My guilt, my compassion, my insecurities, my hopes. After 5 years, she knows exactly which buttons to push. Yesterday, I met with my academic advisor to discuss the assignments I've missed. I expected judgment but found only support. You're not the first student to go through something like this, she said. And your worth isn't determined by a few late papers. She helped me create a recovery plan, a practical roadmap back to academic stability. Last night I had dinner with my roommate for the first time in months. The conversation was awkward at first, both of us navigating the strange territory of reconnection. But by the end of the meal, something had shifted. He hadn't asked direct questions about my relationship, but when I volunteered that things were over, he simply nodded and said, "I'm here if you need to talk, or if you need not to talk." There's a peculiar grief in ending a relationship that wasn't healthy. It's complicated by the knowledge that I'm mourning something that caused pain as much as pleasure. I miss her. Or perhaps I miss the person I thought she could become. The relationship I hoped we would eventually have if I just tried hard enough, loved deeply enough, sacrificed completely enough. I find myself replaying good memories, the moments of connection and joy that kept me holding on through the darker times. The weekend trips during that first year, before the distance became a weapon rather than a circumstance. The late-night conversations about dreams and fears. The inside jokes that made us feel like we shared a world no one else could access. These memories arrive like waves, threatening to wash away my resolve. In these moments, I repeat the words my sister shared during our call. The good parts weren't a lie, but they can't erase or justify the bad parts. I'm learning that closure isn't something I'll get from one final conversation. It's something I need to build for myself, piece by piece, day by day. So I keep moving forward through this strange underwater world, neither fully freed from the past, nor completely confident about the future. Each hour that passes without responding feels both like loss and victory. Each night I fall asleep without checking my phone feels like a small act of self-reclamation. I know the messages will eventually stop. The friend requests will be withdrawn. Why? The digital evidence of our connection will fade. What remains to be seen is who I'll be when I finally surface. 2 weeks have passed. The flood of messages has slowed to an occasional drip, one every few days rather than dozens per hour. Each one still lands like a stone in still water, creating ripples of doubt and longing, but the ripples fade more quickly now. I've started to notice things I hadn't for years. Small things. The way sunlight filters through the leaves outside my window in the morning. 1 hour, the particular rhythm of my roommate's footsteps coming down the hallway. The satisfaction of completing an assignment without interruption. The taste of food when I'm not eating while anxiously watching my phone. Yesterday, I ran into a former classmate at the campus coffee shop. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing important, a new movie, a difficult professor, plans for the summer. It was an ordinary conversation, the kind people have every day without thinking twice about it. But, for me, it felt revolutionary. I didn't check my phone once. I didn't worry about having to explain who I was talking to or why. I didn't feel the need to cut the interaction short to prevent potential conflict. I just existed. In the moment. Present. Last weekend I went home for the first time in months. The drive was only an hour, but it had felt impossible before. Too many permissions needed, too many potential problems, too many explanations required for every minute spent away. My mother cried when she saw me. Not dramatically, just a quiet welling of tears as she held me longer than usual. "There you are," she whispered, and I understood what she meant. Part of me had been missing, and somehow, it was starting to return. My father, never one for many words, simply squeezed my shoulder and said, "Good to have you back, kid." My sister made my favorite meal without being asked. These small gestures of love, uncomplicated, unburdened by conditions, felt almost foreign after so long in a relationship where affection was a currency to be earned rather than a gift freely given. I expected them to ask questions about what happened, to demand explanations or offer unsolicited advice. Instead, they simply created space for me to be there, neither pushing nor pulling, just allowing. On Sunday night, sitting on the porch swing with my sister like we used to years ago, I finally talked about it. Not everything, there's too much to unpack in one conversation, but enough. The constant criticism, the isolation, the walking on eggshells, the impossible standards, the blocking and silent treatments, the gradual erosion of my sense of self. She listened without interruption, without the "I told you," so that she had every right to say. When I finished, she asked only one question. "Do you understand now that none of that was love?" I didn't answer immediately. Part of me still wanted to defend what we had, to explain the complexity, to honor the good moments that existed alongside the bad. But, finally, I nodded. I'm starting to. That night, I slept for 10 hours straight, the first truly restful sleep I'd had in months, possibly years. I woke to find that I'd received another message during the night, but I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I went downstairs and had breakfast with my family, letting the notification sit unread. When I finally did read it hours later, I felt the familiar pull to respond, the conditioned urge to fix and explain and apologize. But underneath that reflex was something newer and stronger, the understanding that I don't owe anyone access to my life, especially someone who treated that access as an opportunity for control, rather than connection. I closed the message without replying and returned my phone to my pocket. In the space between her breaths and mine, I'm finding my own rhythm again. A month has passed since the night everything changed. Messages have stopped entirely now. My last glimpse of her digital presence was a relationship status change notification that briefly appeared before I adjusted my settings to see less of her life. I didn't need to know who came after me, what narrative was being constructed about our ending. The urge to check for messages has faded gradually, like a phantom limb sensation that diminishes with time. I still have moments of weakness, late at night especially, when the room is quiet and memories are loud. But these moments pass more quickly now, leaving less devastation in their wake. What surprises me most is what remains after a relationship that consumed so much of my identity. I expected to feel more empty, more lost, without the constant orientation toward another person's needs and moods. Instead, I'm discovering spaces within myself that have been waiting patiently for attention. I found my paintbrushes last week, buried in the back of my closet. The tubes of paint were mostly dried out, but I bought new ones. My first attempts were awkward, hesitant, the visual equivalent of a voice out of practice. But there was joy in the simple act of creating something without fear of judgment or interruption. My grades have recovered, not miraculously, but steadily, through consistent effort that's no longer constantly derailed by emotional emergencies. My advisor commented on the change during our last meeting. "You look more present," she said. A simple observation that carried more weight than she could know. I've reconnected with friends. Some eagerly welcomed me back, others more cautiously. One told me frankly that he wasn't sure he could trust me not to disappear again. His honesty stung, but also reflected a respect I hadn't shown him when I allowed my relationship to swallow all other connections. "I understand," I told him. "I wouldn't trust me either. But I'd like the chance to rebuild that trust if you're willing. Some days are harder than others. There are moments when loneliness hits with unexpected force, when the absence of constant communication, even if that communication was often painful, leaves me feeling adrift. In these moments I remind myself that there's a difference between being alone and being lonely, between the healthy solitude of self-discovery and the isolation of a controlling relationship. I've started seeing a counselor through the university's mental health services. I resisted the idea at first, worried about what seeking help might imply about my strength or resilience. But there's a certain courage I've learned in acknowledging that some wounds need more than just time to heal properly. During our sessions, I'm beginning to understand how I ended up staying in a situation that was so clearly harmful. The counselor uses terms like trauma, bonding, and intermittent reinforcement that give clinical shape to experiences I couldn't previously name. This understanding doesn't excuse what happened, but it offers a framework for ensuring it doesn't happen again. Perhaps the most significant change is in how I experience time. For 5 years, my days were structured around someone else's needs and emotions. Now, hours belong to me again. I can spend an afternoon reading in the park without providing real-time updates. I can turn my phone off during study sessions without dreading the consequences. I can fall asleep without sending a goodnight message, and wake up without immediately checking for overnight crises. This freedom still feels strange sometimes, a shoe that fits perfectly but doesn't yet have the comfort of long wear. But each day brings more ease, more certainty that I'm walking in the right direction. What remains, I'm learning, is more than enough. 6 months have passed. The seasons have changed twice since that night. My life has developed new rhythms, new patterns that no longer orbit around someone else's gravity. The academic year is ending. My grades recovered enough to maintain my scholarship, though the early damage from those lost weeks couldn't be entirely undone. I've made peace with that imperfection, a B that represents survival rather than failure. I saw her today for the first time since everything ended. Not in person, but in a photo posted by a mutual acquaintance. She was smiling, arm around someone new, looking much the same as I remembered. My heart did a strange little stutter, not quite pain, not quite nostalgia, something more complicated and less intense than either. What struck me most wasn't seeing her, but my reaction to seeing her. The absence of the familiar panic, the lack of urgent need to analyze what her happiness might mean about me or our past. It was just a photo of someone I used to know, living a life that no longer intersects with mine. I never did respond to any of those messages. Never sought the closure that part of me felt entitled to. Never got the chance to say all the things I'd rehearsed in my mind during those first difficult weeks. About how her behavior affected me. About the person I lost while trying to be who she wanted. About the difference between love and control. For a long time, this felt like unfinished business, a conversation eternally pending. I drafted messages I never sent, practiced speeches with no audience. I wanted desperately to be understood, to make her see what had happened between us from my perspective. The counselor I've been seeing helped me understand that this desire for mutual understanding, for acknowledgement of harm done, was natural but ultimately an extension of the same pattern, seeking validation from someone who had consistently denied my reality. Closure, she told me during one session, doesn't always come from external sources. Sometimes it's something we have to create for ourselves. At first, this seemed impossible. How could I find resolution without conversation, without exchange, without at least trying to make her understand? But gradually, I've come to recognize the wisdom in those words. The closure I sought wouldn't have come from one final discussion, no matter how eloquent or honest I managed to be. It wasn't about finding the perfect words to make someone else understand my experience. It was about fully understanding and honoring that experience myself. The words I needed to speak weren't for her at all. They were for me. I needed to tell myself that what happened wasn't acceptable. That love doesn't demand the erasure of self. That isolation isn't protection. That walking on eggshells isn't respect. That constant anxiety isn't passion. I needed to acknowledge that I stayed too long, ignored too many warnings, and allowed too many boundaries to be crossed, not to blame myself, but to ensure I would recognize these patterns if they appeared again. I needed to forgive myself for the relationships I neglected, the opportunities I missed, the parts of myself I surrendered in a misguided attempt to make someone else whole. Most importantly, I needed to recognize that seeking closure from someone who never acknowledged the harm they caused was another form of giving away my power, of placing my healing in hands that had already proven careless with my well-being. So, instead of sending messages into a void, I wrote letters I never intended to send. I filled journal pages with all the things I needed to express: the anger, the hurt, the regret, the loss. I spoke these truths to my counselor, to trusted friends who had earned the right to hear them, and eventually, to my own reflection. And somewhere in that process, the desperate need for her to understand began to fade. The weight of unspoken words grew lighter. The pending conversation became less urgent, then unnecessary, and finally, irrelevant. This, I've come to understand, is what real closure feels like. Not a perfect finale where everyone acknowledges their part, but the quiet certainty that the story no longer requires someone else's validation to be complete. The words remain unspoken between us. And that, I finally accepted, is exactly as it should be. A year has passed since the night I chose silence over the familiar cycle of pain and reconciliation. A full revolution around the sun. A complete cycle of seasons. I'm preparing to graduate next semester. My senior project is a series of paintings exploring transformation and resilience. Canvases that begin in darkness and gradually open into light. My professor says they show promise. More importantly, they feel true. I've started dating again, cautiously. Nothing serious yet, just coffee and conversations that don't leave me analyzing every word for hidden traps. I find myself watching for red flags with vigilant eyes, sometimes too vigilant. My counselor says this hyper-awareness is normal, that the pendulum needs time to find its center. What surprises me most about this year is not how much has changed, but how much has returned. Qualities and interests and relationships I thought were permanently lost. My sense of humor. My ease with spontaneity. My ability to disagree without fear. My willingness to take up space in a room. These returns haven't been automatic or complete. They've come gradually, sometimes reluctantly, like wildlife returning to a forest after a fire. Tentative at first, then with increasing confidence as they find the environment hospitable again. I had lunch with my sister last week. Halfway through our meal, she paused and studied me with a slight smile. "What?" I asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You laughed," she said simply. Really laughed. I haven't heard that in years. I hadn't noticed it myself, the uninhibited sound that came without calculation or consequence. A small thing, but somehow significant enough to bring unexpected tears to my eyes. There are still difficult days. Moments when a song or a place or a particular quality of light brings memories rushing back. Moments when I question my decision not to seek closure through conversation. Moments when I wonder where she is, what she's doing, whether she ever thinks about what happened between us. But these moments no longer derail me. They come, they're acknowledged, and they pass, leaves on a stream rather than boulders in my path. I never did get the closure I thought I needed. The dramatic final scene, the mutual understanding, the perfectly articulated goodbye, those exist only in movies. What I got instead was the chance to close the door myself, not with a slam but with quiet deliberation. What I understand now, a year into this journey, is that the most important door wasn't the one I closed on that relationship. It was the one I opened to myself, to my own needs, my own boundaries, my own definition of love. I don't know what the future holds. Whether I'll find a relationship that feels safe and nurturing. Whether the hypervigilance will fade completely. Whether the lessons I've learned will fully protect me from repeating old patterns. What I do know is that I'll never again silence myself for someone else's comfort. I'll never again apologize for taking up space in my own life. I'll never again mistake control for care or isolation for intimacy. I know that whatever comes next, whatever joy or pain or growth or setback awaits, I'll meet it as myself. Not as the diminished version I became in those 5 years, but as the person I was always meant to be. The person who is still emerging, still healing, still discovering what it means to live without fear of one's own shadow. This morning, I woke early and took a walk as the sun was rising. The campus was quiet, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. I found myself standing still for a moment, eyes closed, feeling the gentle weight of sunshine on my face. In that moment of perfect solitude, I realized something that might have seemed obvious to others, but felt like revelation to me. I am exactly where I need to be. Not because someone else approves or permits it, but because I choose it. Because this life, imperfect, unfinished, sometimes lonely, often beautiful, is finally completely mine again. The door is open. I'm walking through.